CNN calls racism on the 1776 Project a wonderful program that aimed to teach kids accurate history. For progressives, you're only telling the truth if you lie about what actually happened to make less accomplished people better than the way they were. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is The Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today, we start with Donald Trump's proposed 1776 history curriculum. And you remember 1776 history curriculum was an antidote to this critical race version, the 1619 Project. Trump wanted an accurate history curriculum that reflected the arc of America's development, not focusing solely on its warts and its badness, but actually taking into account things like slavery, but talking about the greater arc of history. That's the problem now. As you can imagine, when 1619, which is all about how bad we are, was confronted by the 1776 program, now the defenders, the progressive defenders of critical race theory, have called 1776 a racist history because it dares to tell a history of America that isn't just about how nasty we are.
See, I'm still of the belief that we should just call it history. But anyway, so, Martin Luther King Jr. Day happened the other Monday. And on that very specific day, CNN decided to say that 1776, the history curriculum, was racist. A commission stood up by President Donald Trump as a rebuttal to schools applying a more accurate history curriculum around slavery in the U.S. Issued its inflammatory report on Monday, according to CNN. And so, as we know, the 1619 Project, very quick summation, New York Times editorial people.
Non-historians.
Nikole Hannah-Jones decided to be like, I'm going to come up with a story idea that's going to be a whole big project, and it's going to overtake all of the history curriculum for all of our schools across the nation, and Oprah is going to love me and endorse this. And because in the world we live in, it actually happened.
I'm a second-rate journalism with no history background, but I'm going to write.
Well, she does have a history background, but it was a college degree, so
okay. Not a historian in the sense that we would want somebody writing this stuff. But I'm going to go ahead and rewrite the complete history of America, and every single kid in the country is going to have to suffer for it.
And guess what? Dreams do come true. So the 1619 Project basically states that this country, which isn't even a country in their mind, began back in 1619 when the slaves came over, and ever since then it's just been all the white people, colonialism, slavery, everyone's bad. The end. There's your history lesson. I guess you don't need anything else anymore. So then Donald Trump got some people, we're going to have a commission. They should have just called it Let's Teach History or something, but they called it 1776 as a little jab to the whole 1619. Anyway, so that's why CNN did this whole thing, and they're always crying about being, white supremacy and all that. But then the actual executive director to the 1776 commission, Dr. Matthew Spalding, said the commission's report is defending 1776 as the true founding of America. Spalding and Hillsdale College's vice president for its Washington, D.C. operations and dean of the Van Andel Graduate School of Government noted as well the use of identity politics today may be added to slavery or progressivism or fascism or communism abroad as threats to the founding principles. So these are all the things we've been saying on this show for years now. And if you haven't noticed, Mom and Dad, we kind of care about the good, the bad, and the ugly of the history of the United States.
No one on our side, no one, absolutely no one is saying we whitewash American history. No. American history hasn't been whitewashed. You think about the way history is taught to Germans by German professors, or the way that the Japanese learn the history of the world, or the way Muslims in many countries learn history. always overlooking the worst aspects of their own behavior. The Japanese curriculum is very weak on Japanese imperialism, and a lot about the atom bomb, not a lot about the depredation of the Japanese, not a lot about the rape of Nanking or the Bataan Death March. Same thing in Arabic countries, Muslim countries, right, where we learn how the Muslim Muslim curriculum is very much like the 1619 curriculum. The West is responsible for all evil, and we've done nothing wrong. That's sort of how it's written here. And Carol Swaim, African-American former professor at Vanderbilt University, who we and the Dr. Duke Show interviewed once. She's also a privilege to interview her. She also is a major contributor to the 1776 Project. And so you have a very diverse series of voices, very diverse series of perspectives, talking about what America is. America was a land of slavery, but it isn't. That's what the left can't get their mind around. We were a land of slavery, but we're not, and we haven't been for a long time, and we're the only country in the history of the world to fight a war to stop slavery, and Western culture is the only part of the world that has formally outlived slavery. That matters as much as what our original slavery sin was. That's 1776.
But what you pointed out, without pointing it out, is the fact that you say, Muslim countries, which is teaching Islam, which is religion, and in this country we actually value and respect the rights to not teach that. So what the 1619 Project is creating, in its own sense, its own religion, its own cultish.
It's theological.
It's pagan, and it's doing its own thing. But if you would dare even say that, then you would be the religious bigot.
Well, but that's all they've got. All the left has. All the left has. You've got tens of thousands of books written about American history over the last 300 years, 250 years. Tens of thousands. Almost all of them say the same thing. They show the arc of American history. They point out the good and the bad. All that's been done and covered. The only argument the 1619 people have to any of the intellectual things being brought up here is you're a racist if you disagree.
That's because out of all those tens of thousands of books that possibly could have been looked at, somehow this one by Howard Zinn just keeps rising to the top, floating like a dead body in the water. Right. And so that's the one that they're going off of. That's honestly the one they are using is Howard Zinn, A People's History.
Well, now, in fairness, Howard Zinn, who was radical in the 1970s, looks like a powder puff now, right? So
he probably would get called racist at this point.
Exactly. His entire view. Well, Zinn didn't completely obliterate American greatness. Zinn didn't completely deny progress, right? He emphasized
not woke.
Right? He wasn't woke enough. So here you are 40, 50 years after Howard Zinn, and so the creatures that follow in his wake are much less historically knowledgeable. They're much more ideological in their point in this. And so the 1619 curriculum, I'm proud to say that if your only real argument is you're racist if you disagree with us, then I'm going to disagree with you and not be the... Can we make this our resolution, please, America, for the year 2021? Can we make this our New Year's resolution? When somebody calls you a bigot, and especially these left-wing mind-controlling idiot morons, when somebody calls you a bigot, just smile at them and say, if you say so. Sure, by your definition, absolutely. No problem. And just go about your busy day. Ignore it.
Just say amen.
Amen and?
No, amen. Now, there's nothing endearing, snarky, anything I can do about this next story. It's just an awful story, but hopefully it has a good ending in that a man will be going to prison. Now, it's a disturbing story coming out of Oregon where a former first grade teacher has pled guilty to sexually abusing and trafficking a 15-year-old girl who he met on social media. The guy's name is William Haman. He's 38. Winner. And he pled guilty to one count of sex trafficking of a child for paying the teen for oral sex. Now, this supposedly happened between 2018 to 2019, and he's going to be sentenced now in March, so that's why kind of the story is coming out here. Federal prosecutors seek 13 years and 4 months for him, and they want it to run consecutive to a proposed state prison term of a 1 year, 8 months. And in the state case he's accused, so you have the federal case and now the state case, he's actually being accused of sexual abuse and sodomy in Lane County Circuit Court, and he hasn't actually formally entered any pleas there. So he already pled guilty in federal, then he's got to wait for state too. And that trial doesn't start until March after the already guilty plea. So he had previously taught, again, first grade teacher at Spring Creek Elementary School, and that's in Eugene, Oregon. And he also operated a haunted house attraction. Now, according to the local paper, the Oregonian, the 15-year-old girl was not a student, which is some sort of relief, I guess, but not student of the former teacher. And in a statement, federal prosecutors actually said that agents searched his mobile phone and found a recording of one of the sex acts. Heyman used social media to arrange the meetings with the minor. So mom and dad, social media, we've said it before and we'll say it again, know what your kids are on and what they're doing, because this creepiness is happening. So he said he met the girl on social media. He paid for the girl for oral sex and recorded her performing sex acts between 2018 and July 2019, according to the federal prosecutors. And so she was 15 at the time, and then he was actually arrested in 2019, and she was then 16, and he got arrested, and he had showed up at her school. So again, all of this is happening at our schools.
I'm glad to say that he didn't do it to his own kids, his own students in his own classrooms. Apparently, he was able to not do that with his children in his own classrooms. It's probably why we have so much information about it. If this had happened to one of the kids in his classroom, we'd get the "we don't talk about personnel issues" comment. It makes you wonder a little bit, doesn't it, about what kind of a haunted house Mr. Heyman actually put on for the kiddies.
Well, at the University of Chicago, they're, wanting to step up their activism even more, because who needs to step up their actual education process? So now they want to create a Department of Critical Race Studies. We've talked about critical race studies umpteen times, and now we're elevating it to the level of, you know what? We're creating it a whole darn department. Why not? Probably a whole wing. They'll get their own, building out there. It'll be beautiful, because it's critical race studies. And as you may or may not know, at this point, you probably know critical race. It's the idea that the law and legal institutions are racist. It's all racist.
It's not everything is racist.
It's just all racist.
Critical racism is education from the perspective that everything is racist. So whatever you bring up, the first thing and the only thing you're allowed to talk about is how it disproportionately affects minorities.
Yes, it's when you say race, then it's socially constructed. It's socially constructed, but it's used by white people. It's always used by the white people to, enhance them.
Only white people can.
Their economic status and their political status. It's only the whiteys who are doing this, so they're obviously the bad people.
So every aspect of white culture, now and forever, is tainted. So go back to the ancient Greeks. They gave us geometry, which is, of course, racist, because who's to say there aren't other kinds of triangles that don't have three sides? By pointing out the ancient Greeks in Euclid's geometry that there are only certain three kinds of triangles possible, right? Well, that just is bigoted, because there are 300 million people in America. Why aren't there 300 million possible triangles? That's white supremacy. Every aspect of the culture moving backwards, every projection of the future is funneled through only this lens, right, of how everything's going to destroy minorities. So when minorities get more powerful, they get stronger, they get richer. Hell, you even have a president who was a minority. That doesn't count. All that does is reinforce how bad it is that you had a black president, and still things are as horrible as they are.
Now, what Dr. Duke just gave you was a summation of all the various courses that will be taught in critical race studies. We will have math is racist. That course you can probably take as part of the major, I'm sure, once they get it. And then you have the bow down to Barack Obama course specifically, and then you have the other, I don't know, you mentioned a couple other things. They'll all, I'm sure, be courses within critical race studies.
Democracy, liberty,
all different courses you could take.
Everything that Western culture evolved has to be wicked, right?
I'm sure.
So, you might want to buy the latest iPhone and never give it up if you're African American, but you have to admit that it was created by white supremacy, right? So the only justice is if the Apple says to you, all black people get free phones for the rest of their lives and no bill, right? We'll make the white guys pay. That would be justice, right? Every major advancement, every wonderful good thing, any possible uplifting sociological event in the last 5,000 years is evil if white people had anything to do with it. And the only way black people can get ahead of is if they kill that. It's not enough to be free now. It's not enough to be freer than you were. It's not enough to be more profitable than you've ever been. You have to be completely made whole for everything that's come before you. And the only way you do that is to lay waste to the past. And this is really an important thing, because University of Chicago is one of the last outliers, right? As recently as 5 years ago, people were pointing to the University of Chicago for their great freshman seminar books, right? They were almost exclusively books written by they were the classics. That's gone now. The classics have been removed from the University of Chicago's great book course for freshmen. Now, University of Chicago is doing stuff like this. We maybe become the first university in the whole country, so you pay a price. Notice that Chicago has been more quote-unquote even though it hasn't been, more and more conservative over the last 20 years, they're going to have to pay a bigger price. They're going to have to be the first university that creates a division, a complete department on civil rights, on the idea of critical race. Here's my thinking. I said this many times in the Dr. Duke Show. In 10 years, 15 years, you will not have English departments and history departments and philosophy departments and sociology departments. You're not going to have them. What you're going to have instead is the humanities is going to be this. Every humanities program at every university will be critical race. So your kids are going to show up as freshmen. They're going to learn to write in freshman writing classes through critical race lenses. Their math courses, their history courses, the books that they read are all going to be focused on this. The humanities are doomed. This is going to be the first step. And once Chicago does this, universities across the country will be falling all over themselves. And all the resources now going to teaching philosophy and history and art history will be funneled to this, and everything will change. That's coming very quickly.
Well, I think it's already here. They just haven't officially retitled it like they're going to potentially do here at the University of Chicago. Now, my prediction is that Oprah will be one of the first professors to be at the Department of Critical Race Studies at the University of Chicago. I'm putting my, 10 cents I have in my pocket
well, there is
on
hope.
That.
I mean, fat studies is now a thing. And so people like me, Oprah can help people like me because, fat studies is now a legitimate, it does make you.
You don't need English, just go to fat studies.
Being fat does make you a minority, just so you know.
Does that make you,
it makes me your superior.
Are you supposed to be able to teach it then, or are you
to
take
it? Very fit people like you need to be punished for not being me.
Okay.
Don't you see that your very existence? No, if I said this about race, people would nod their heads, right?
People they're doing it about fat.
People like you have to be racially,
shaming.
Right? People like you have to be punished because you make me uncomfortable. Well, it's the same thing with non-fat people.
What about height people?
Same thing. Well, now that's another thing. You may want to make that argument, right? You may want to counter my fatness with your shortness. At which point
you're pretty
both,
short too.
Now in the intersectional game that is played, that means it means your shortness must team up with my fatness to create a superculture of persecution that makes white people feel real good about themselves.
No. Now, going back to the story, Gerald McSwiggan. What a name. Of course, he's a university spokesman. He's McSwiggan. He said, should this proposal be approved through the university processes, because it has to go through the faculty senate or whatnot, because they need to approve it at the end of the month.
Did he consult with Dean McLovin on this?
Yeah, right. He speaks of Provost Ka Lee. Lee will work with the relevant division to ensure that resources are provided for its support. She recognizes a commitment of many faculty members at the university to ensuring that the study of race continues to thrive here.
Yeah, because it's not enough that it already dominates everything that's done anyway. It's not enough, right, that it has transformed the University of Chicago from a great non-Ivy League school into one more race-baiting, overpriced piece of crap college. That's not enough. Now we got to phase out everything. So my horror story, right? I arrived at the university I'm teaching at right now in 2008. There was no social justice anything, nothing. 12 years ago, nothing. Then we got a social justice minor. Then we got 2 years later. Then 3 years later, we had a social justice major. Now every major course is taught through the lens of some sort of social justice. In 12 years, that's how we went from no social justice to only social justice.
And why are you not the chair of the department?
Why am I not the chair?
I mean, you clearly were the reason they created this department.
Well, to fight against
people. You get here, and
yes.
then all of a sudden there's a minor, and then all of a sudden there's a major.
The answer is not that. The question is not that. The question is, given who you are, how are you still there?
I think you should be the head of the department. I'm saying you should work a little harder for that.
Yeah.
So now we're going to provide you with some real education. And again, we're talking about That Hideous Strength, which is the third book in C.S. Lewis's space trilogy. So it's Dr. Elwin Ransom. In this book, he's on Earth. He's doing things. And Dr. Duke's going to talk about them.
So we're back talking about That Hideous Strength, which is going to be our dystopian novel for this entire week, Monday through Friday, in Instant Classic. And so much that C.S. Lewis wrote back in 1945 in his space trilogy. The first novel was Out of the Silent Planet, brilliant. Paralandra is the second one, and this is the third and final one. It's called That Hideous Strength. This is the only one of the three science fiction novels to take place on Earth. After Elwin Ransom travels to Mars and Venus, and various events happen there, he comes back to Earth where he's going to have to help defend Earth from an invasion. I won't tell you who's invading. It's really neat stuff. I hope you find time to read That Hideous Strength. If you can't go back and read all three, you can read the last one, and it will make sense on its own. But this is, in the world we live in, if you want a really clear elucidation of how we got here and what the problems that got us here are, just read it. Educate yourself on this. We're talking 1945, Lewis said, this is what's going to happen in the West. Here's one more example of a great quote from that book. One of the main characters is Mark. He's a shallow graduate of a university. He's a PhD holding shallow guy. In the character of Mark, you have the typical modern PhD. Undereducated, by the way PhDs used to be educated. He's the new PhD, right? It's easy to get a PhD. You throw enough money at a university, sooner or later they'll give it to you. And as a consequence, Mark is a product of the new learning. He's shallow. He never really learned anything. It's all superficial. He's been recruited by a wicked organization called the NICE. As a journalist, they want Mark to write propaganda for them. Mark, of course, being shallow, agrees to make a lot of money leaving the university to write this propaganda, and finds out ultimately what kind of a horrible situation he's gotten him into. But here's Mark being described by C.S. Lewis, the modern academic. It must be remembered that in Mark's mind, hardly one rag of noble thought, either Christian or pagan, had a secure lodging. His education had been neither scientific nor classical, but merely modern. The severities, both of abstraction and of high human tradition, had passed him by completely, and he had neither peasant shrewdness nor aristocratic honor to help him. He was, like all graduates of modern universities, he was a man of straw, a glib examinee in subjects that require no exact knowledge, like critical race theory. He had always done well on essays and general papers, and the first hint of any real threat to his bodily life knocked him sprawling. And when this man of straw, this poorly educated, non-critical thinker, this abstract mess of non-education, when he first encountered the fact that he must die, when he was first threatened with murder, knocked him over. He had nothing in his education to make him stand up and defend himself. Welcome to the new educated man, Lewis said, and he knew better than anything what was coming.
Now we want to take a special moment here at the show to show some love to our Patriot Club members, and today we're going to give a special shout out to Anna from Wenatchee, Washington, all the way out there on the West Coast. Thank you for supporting us, Anna. Now, if you're a fan of the show, please consider a one-time tax-deductible donation to support the Patriot Club, and we're going to send you a signature tumbler. It's just a little thank you. Thank you. Now, all you have to do to sign up is visit patriotclub.us. That's patriotclub.us. And we're going to wrap things up with the fun fact of the day. Actual history. John Adams is the author of the oldest written constitution still being used. It's Massachusetts. It was written in 1780. It was actually passed then. It helped structure the U.S. Constitution, which was written 7 years later when Adams was a diplomat serving in Europe, where he was securing loans. He was helping with things like, the Treaty of Paris, all that stuff, and he was being an ambassador in London. So, John Adams. Actual history.
And that wraps up this show. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie. Until next time, stay educated, my friends.